Hello, everyone. It's Scott, and we're back with Wednesday's Magic the Gathering Foundation spoilers, and we've got a bunch of interesting cards today. Actually, we got the starter set information today, so we've got over 300 cards in that starter collection, and a lot of them are reprints. But we do have a few cards from that are also new to standard, and I want to talk about those along with the regular Foundation's previews of new cards. So let's dive into today's previews. So first we've got Banner of Kinship for 5 mana. It's an artifact, and as this artifact enters the battlefield, choose a creature type. This artifact enters with a fellowship counter on it for each creature you control of the chosen type. Creatures you control of the chosen type get +1/+1 for each fellowship counter on this artifact. So 5 mana is a lot for an artifact, but this is very powerful in a tribal deck. So the Lizards deck, the Mouse deck, any deck that we're thinking of that is going to have a tribal theme, this is an incredibly powerful card. So this is definitely going to see standard play in those tribal decks. I know turn 5 is, kind of a long way to get there, but I think it's definitely going to be worth it in standard, because if you've got 5 or 6 creatures on the field, and hopefully some of those with nice abilities, like trample or something of that nature, then you're going to be able to do a ton of damage the turn this comes into play. Next, we've got Celestial Armor for 2 and a white mana. You get an artifact that's an equipment. It has flash, and when this equipment enters the battlefield, attach it to target creature you control. That creature gains hexproof and indestructible until end of turn. Equipped creature gets +2 and has flying, and you can equip it for 3 and a white mana. Another very strong artifact from today's previews. A card like this already in the set that was played in standard, so I think this will be standard playable as well. So a couple copies of to give your creatures that evasive nature of being able to fly, and then also because you can flash it in at any point your opponent tries to use spot removal against your creature. So I think all in all, a very good Magic card. Next, we've got Ramos Dragon Engine for 6 mana. It's a legendary artifact creature that's a dragon and is a 4/4 with flying, and whenever you cast a spell, put a +1/+1 counter on Ramos for each of that spell's colors. Remove 5 +1/+1 counters from Ramos and add 2 mana of each color to your mana pool. Activate only once each turn. So this is actually a reprint. This has been in Commander before, but it hasn't been in Standard before. And I think this is a very, very interesting card when it comes to Standard. And I think maybe the Ramp deck would want this, because you're going to be able to get +1/+1 counters on this in a 2 or 3 color deck fairly easily. And the ability to add 10 mana to your mana pool at some point probably puts you in a pretty good position to win the game if you've got, a spell that's going to use that mana efficiently. Next, we've got Preposterous Proportions. For 5 and 2 green mana, you get a sorcery, and creatures you control get +10/+10 and gain vigilance until end of turn. I don't think this is going to see standard play, but it's a cute spell. 7 mana in standard is way too much for a spell like this, even though it's incredibly powerful. And basically, in kind of in a situation like this, if you get 1 or 2 creatures to deal combat damage to your opponent, you probably are going to win the game. But the problem is getting to that 7 mana, and that's going to be hard to do in the current standard environment. Next, we've got another reprint that's new to standard, and that's Extravagant Replication for 4 and 2 blue mana. You get an enchantment, and at the beginning of your upkeep, create a token that's a copy of another target non-land permanent you control. And this is a really powerful ability where every single turn you're going to get a copy of a non-land target permanent you control. So it can be a token, it could be anything. So I think this is going to definitely have some standard playability in the right build. It's probably not a 4 of in any deck, but maybe a one or two copies of it in the right deck could swing the game in your favor. This is the kind of card that can swing the game quickly into your favor if it's not, taken out by your opponent. All right, next we've got another Commander reprint new to Standard, and that's Dread Summons for X and 2 green mana. You get a sorcery. Each player mills X cards, and then for each creature card put into a graveyard this way, create a tap 2/2 black zombie creature token. So, you're kind of playing the lottery here, but if you're playing against a deck that your opponent has that's creature based, this could be a pretty good spell where you could get 3, 4, 5 copies of it depending on what your build of your deck is and your opponent's build are. So I think it might have some standard playability in a zombie deck, but I'm not sure if it's powerful enough beyond that to see play. Next, we've got Soulstone Sanctuary. Okay, it's a land, it taps for colorless mana, but for 4 mana, this land becomes a 3/3 creature with vigilance and all creature types. It's still a land. So, very powerful land here. Again, it's another one of those cards that we've seen before in Commander. But again, these kind of creature lands, they tend to be playable in Standard, so I would expect this to be playable as well. All right, and moving on to our lower rarity cards for the day. Our first is going to be Goblin Negotiation for X and 2 red mana. You get a sorcery. And Goblin Negotiation deals X damage to target creature. Create a number of 1/1 red goblin creature tokens equal to the amount of excess damage dealt to that creature this way. So kind of a underpowered potential removal spell against one of your opponent's creatures, but you do get the upside of creating those goblin tokens. But I think this is a card more for the limited format than it is for constructed formats. All right, next we've got Dawnwing Marshal for 1 and a white mana. You get a Cat Soldier, that's a 2/2 with flying, and for 4 and 1 creatures you control get +1/+1 until end of turn. So a great new card here. Paying 2 mana for a 2/2 flyer, I think is a very good rate in Standard. And also it's a soldier, and we know we've already got a kind of right now underpowered soldier deck, but this might be kind of the kind of card that helps that deck have some more standard playability. Next, we've got Release the Dogs for 3 and a white mana. You get a sorcery and create 4 1/1 white dog creature tokens. And this is a jumpstart card from 2022. And, certainly a good standard card where if you're playing some kind of really go wide strategy at 4, getting 4 creatures, might work out for you in Standard. Next, we've got Twin Blade Blessing for 1 and 2 white mana. You get an aura that has flash, and you get to enchant creature, and enchanted creature has double strike. So very powerful ability in Standard, getting double strike. 3 mana for this is kind of high, but in the right build, it might be just what the doctor ordered, and getting this into the, we've already got kind of a Boros Auras deck going, and I think this could be, a top end enchantment in that to give one of your creatures double strike, and hopefully they've already got trample, and then you're going to be able to do a lot of damage to your opponent. Next, we've got Icewind Elemental for 4 and a blue mana. You get an elemental, that's a 3/4 with flying, and when this creature enters the battlefield, draw a card and then discard a card. It's a common, definitely limited playable, but probably won't see any standard play at all. Next, we've got Starlight Snare for 2 and a blue mana. You get an enchantment, that's an aura. Enchant creature, when this aura enters, tap enchanted creature. Enchanted creature doesn't untap during its controller's untap step. So, a way of preventing your opponent from attacking with a creature. Reasonable, at the common, it's nothing spectacular, it's nothing terrible. But this is part of the starter collection, so something for new players to use. Next, we've got Vile Entomber for 2 and 2 black mana, you get a Zombie Warlock. That's a 2/2 with Death Touch. And when this creature enters the battlefield, search your library for a card, put that card into your graveyard, then shuffle. So in a Graveyards Matter deck, this might have a place in that, but 4 mana for a 2/2, even with Death Touch and getting that card ability, probably isn't going to see much standard play. Next, we've got Ravenous Giant for 2 and 2 red mana. You get a Giant, that's a 5/5. At the beginning of your upkeep, this creature deals 1 damage to you. So, kind of a downside on it, but it is a 5/5. If it had Trample, I would say it would be more playable, but probably nothing more than a limited card. And again, this is another one of those beginner collection cards. Next, we've got Mild-Mannered Librarian for a green mana. You get a human, and it's a 1/1. And for 3 and a green mana, this creature becomes a werewolf. Put 2 +1/+1 counters on it, and you draw a card. Activate only once. So nice little ability on the card. In the mid to late game, you can make it a 3/3, but it's probably not going to see much, if any, standard play. Next, we've got Carnelian Orb of Dragonkind for 2 and a red mana. You get an artifact, and it taps for red mana. This mana is spent on a dragon creature spell. It gains haste until end of turn. So, interesting card here. Again, this is one of the reprints that was in Commander before, and I like the ability on it because it's going to give your dragons haste. A lot of the dragons that we've seen from this set and we currently have in Standard don't have haste, but this giving them haste by you tapping it to use that red mana on the card, it might, even though it's a common, it might have a little bit of standard playability if a true dragon deck does come together. So we've got Spring Bloom Druid for 2 and a green mana. You get a creature that's an elf druid and is a 1/1. And when this creature enters the battlefield, you may sacrifice a land. If you do, search your library for up to 2 basic land cards, put them onto the battlefield tapped, and then shuffle. So 3 mana. Basically, you're getting to put a land onto the battlefield when you cast this. So limited playable, but I don't think it's going to see really any constructed play. Next, we've got Venom Connoisseur for 1 and a green mana. You get a 2/2, that's a human druid, and whenever another creature you control enters the battlefield, this creature gains Death Touch until end of turn. If this is the second time this ability has resolved this turn, all creatures you control gain Death Touch until end of turn. So, another, potentially powerful card, giving everything Death Touch. But it is reliant on you being able to cast multiple creature spells on a turn. But, having one turn where that is the case could be all that it takes for you to win a game. All right, and those are the new to Standard cards we saw today in our previews. So hopefully we've got some things that are playable. I really do like the Kinship Banner. I think that's going to be a really good card in Standard. And remember to like and subscribe to get further content like this throughout Foundation's spoiler season. And I posted our preview videos for a couple of other the first couple of days of Foundation spoiler season, so you can take a look at those as well. Thanks. I'll see you next time.